And here we are.
Hi.
So you saying hi to me or you saying hi to them?
Well, I definitely wasn't saying hi to the guinea pigs.
Yep. This is how it is every day.
They're so cute. That's Adler, who's running around back there, scoping out, searching for some gnomes. Okay, what
That's
are we
kind
talking
of
about?
Yeah, so we're here to talk about Mystic Vale. Welcome to this month's board game club. Um, And so we thought, so this time around, we're going to be talking by Mystic Vale, which is a game by Alderac, or what's generally people is AEG for most people. I don't know why I didn't bother to say the name out. Most
I
people just
didn't
say
even
it.
recognize them when you said it like that.
Yeah, that's actually what it stands for. Is
I
Alderac.
know, no, I know it does. That's never how I refer to them.
Yeah, so it's by AEG, and came out a little over a year ago. I want to say was it last year or 2 years ago? I can't quite remember at this point, but not that long ago by gaming standards. And the neat thing about Mystic Vale that kind of caught people's attention and really uh, brought it to the forefront for people to pay attention to is the uniqueness to the game, because the Mystic Vale, it's a card game, but it does something a little bit different than a lot of other card games in that it's a fixed size card game, but you can change the cards throughout the course of the game. So the deck never gets any bigger, unlike say a deck builder. You always have a fixed number of 20 cards, but throughout the course of the game, you're going to make those cards potentially better. That's kind of the entire concept of the game. And the theme behind it for Mystic Vale is that, just for those who haven't done their homework for this month, is to you are playing as druids who are trying to kind of stave off this encroaching blight that's trying to take over the land in this enchanted valley, and you're trying to stave it off. And maybe you can't defeat it, but you can definitely slow its progress, that sort of thing. Of course, the goal is to that's kind of the thematic aspect of it to it. But what draws people to the game isn't usually druids. I don't find that druids is usually a huge selling point for most people. Am I wrong in that? What do you
I
think?
mean, I don't think you're wrong. I just think that I would love a game that's like super about druids, but it feels like we'll probably talk about this a little bit more later on. But it does feel like the whole Mystic Vale thing is a little bit tacked on.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because that's something I definitely want to touch upon, is the theme of this game. But for those who might be a little bit rusty in how the game works, each person gets a deck of cards. It looks a little something like this, and you get a bunch of these. Then each card in the game is sleeved, and the game actually gives you sleeves to use, because you're going to need them. Because what's going to happen is, over the course of the game, you're going to be taking your cards and you're going to be buying not new cards, but new portions of a card that you actually want to add into an existing card that you have. So you're buying individual sections, so either top, middle, or bottom, to add into the cards that you're playing for that round, assuming you can pay for them. Turn structure is pretty straightforward. You flip over a number of cards until you get a number of curse symbols. If you can actually see that there, it's a little blurry, but you get a number of those curse symbols, and as long as you don't bust, because there's kind of this press or luck element, you have a bunch of cards in front of you, just like any other normal deck builder, where you have resource costs. In this case, they're kind of the moon symbol, which allows you to buy more cards. Or veils, which are kind of things that give you special abilities and give you VP, but they're not actually added to your deck. And so you're going to buy cards on your turn, and then you flip over the next set of cards and you do it again. You keep going and replenish the deck over and over again. And each person keeps doing this until You have a pool of chips. So again, not unlike stuff like Race of the Galaxy or whatnot, where you have VP chips, and the game goes until you run out of the pile of VP chips. That's kind of the gist of the game in a nutshell. It's not super complicated in terms of how it works. And so a lot of the game, a lot of its appeal is, one, it's an accessible game, but two, it's also kind of a novelty. And then again, we're going to come back to the idea of, how much of a novelty is it really? But the first thing I really wanted to touch upon is that what I mentioned before, the idea. I want to get people's thoughts on the idea of a deck that upgrades itself throughout the course of the game versus a traditional deck builder, say like Ascension or Dominion. So what's your take on that idea of being able to upgrade specific parts of a card?
I thought it was really cool. I mean, yeah, it's very clearly a novelty, but I thought it was fun. I love deck builders, so I think that helps. I think if you don't love deck builders, then this isn't really gonna like change your mind. Can you not? But I did really, really have fun with the idea of like you get to make your own cards, and there probably is a lot of strategy involved in like which ones you choose, like which layers you choose to put on which cards, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. So I love deck builders personally. I think that they are a lot of fun, and I like how especially the newer era of deck builders are really kind of trying to change things and do things a little bit differently than your standard kind of your standard Dominion style thing, where you're kind of engine building with the a standard deck builder. And Mystic Vale kind of is a nice deviation from that, because it is a fixed deck, and you actually do get to tailor how you want the deck to work a little bit. It's not a full fixed deck type game, say like Sentinels of the Multiverse, which we did a few months ago, where each person has a unique deck, but it's a fixed deck. You can't change it. So the only thing that you really get is the randomization of the cards that you draw at any given time. So it's kind of a hybrid between those two approaches.
It doesn't feel like a fixed deck at all, though.
Right. Well, why do you say that?
Because you are constantly buying things. You're constantly getting new things and changing your deck. So even though, yeah, the number of physical cards in your deck isn't changing from time to time, it doesn't feel like it, because everything, like what is on those cards, is changing every time. Bye, buddy. Spark, I left.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. Okay, I can understand that. So I'm curious, Eric actually in the chat, he says that he feels like you have more agency in building your deck in Mystic Vale versus a traditional deck builder. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can see that, because you have a lot more options, and you have a lot more you can do to change your strategy. So, instead of just deciding, hey, I want to put this card in my deck, you can decide specifically, hey, I want to put this action in my deck, and I want it to always occur at the same time as this other action. I want to put them on the same card so that they always come out together. And I think that can give you a lot of really interesting strategy.
Okay, I can see that. I think that also the kind of one of the real differences is that so many deck builders, they revolve around the entire idea of building an engine, albeit one that you may not be able to completely control at all times, depending on which deck builder it is and how much thinning you can do. If there's if there's not a lot of trashing cards, the deck can get diluted. If there's too much, then the deck can sort of get redundant. And so that's, you kind of run into that problem with deck builders where you can have too much focus on the engine building side of it, whereas in Mystic Vale it takes a little bit of a different tack, because you're essentially, every person starting out with the same basic resources, just as you would with a deck builder, but one, you get to tailor it a little bit differently, and it's always going to be a little unique. And then two, the deck never gets bigger. It never gets bloated. It never gets redundant. Instead, the deck can only get better as the game goes on. Because like, you could have games like in a normal deck builder. Think of like, if you're playing Dominion, and I keep going back to Dominion, but if you're playing Dominion, and you think, hey, if I'm buying a lot of these cards, this is going to create this awesome engine, but then you have dead hands, and
right.
So you think that what you're doing is actually helping you, and occasionally you'll have that awesome explosive turn where you'll play half your deck, and that's great. But then you can have other turns where nothing happens.
Right, you can expand too much.
Right, or just you try a strategy and it doesn't work, and you're sort of locked out of the strategic advantage of the pacing and everything. Whereas in this one, it can only go up. There's not a lot of cards that you can buy in Mystic Vale that are going to make your deck actually worse for you. The only ones I can think of off the top of my head are those that will add additional curse symbols to your deck beyond the standard curse lands, these guys.
But that's usually as a trade-off for some other benefit.
Right.
So one thing I've found to that end, though, is that you can have cases where you're pursuing a strategy and you get a card to go for a specific strategy, and then you put it in the wrong place, or not even the wrong place, but you put it in a place where you think it's going to work, and then it ends up not working well there at all. And unlike Dominion, where you then have a chance of getting some good hands when that card comes up in a different order, this way, like, it's always stuck in that not great place.
Right.
I mean, that was a mistake I think I made, a while ago when we first played, and not really understanding the different interactions. It's really easy to mess that up, and then have basically a card that doesn't do anything for you for the whole game.
Right, and while it can be, I guess, a not ideal card, there is no card that you can do that's just completely useless. Because even in the idea of, say you have blank cards and you get a bunch of these in your deck to start the game, even the blank cards don't inherently affect you, because
they don't do anything.
They don't do anything. And the thing is, the way that that you refresh, because it's not a standard thing where you draw 4 cards, you draw 5 cards, you're essentially going until you hit your limit for the curses, and then even then you can press your luck further. And since if you have a card like a blank card that has no symbol on it, you just throw it on the table and you keep going, so it doesn't hurt you in a negative way. So you can have cards that are not optimized, but there's not a lot of cards that you can throw in your deck that are just going to make it worse. And I think that's part of the intrinsic appeal, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think one of the most rewarding things in Mystic Vale, and why so many people were drawn to it, at least from a mechanical standpoint, is the idea of being able to take a card like this and turn it into a card like this.
Ooh, you did some prep work.
I did. And that's kind of the whole crux of the game, and that's part of the fun there. And so I guess that actually leads me into like the next thing that I wanted to kind of bring up, which is different ways that you can play the game, because for the most part the turn structure works exactly the same, but there's 2 real, I guess, tactical decisions paths that you can take, and you don't have to necessarily do one or the other or both or whatever. But I was curious about the first one, is that replenishment aspect, because when you replenish your hand at the end of your turn, you're going to decide, at the beginning of your next turn, you're going to decide whether or not you want to press your luck. There's a little bit of a press your luck mechanic in this, where if you have a kind of a dead hand, as it happens with deck games, you can try to press your luck and hope that the next card that you put out is not another curse land, which allows you to get more cards in front of you, which gives you more money and that sort of thing. So I'm curious from you and from you, how often do you actually do that? How often do you press your luck in order to try to
Never as much as I should.
get... Why do you say that?
I feel like a big part of the game is managing the pressing your luck aspect of it. And you have those tokens to the circle tokens. I don't know what they're supposed to symbolize, but basically every time you what is it? You can use them to get an extra like money. And then if you are pressing your luck and bust, they're refreshed. So you use it to get an extra money, you flip it over, and then the only way you can get it back is by essentially busting. And so that is a huge part of the game, and that can be a really big benefit, I feel like, if you manage it well and you know strategically, like, oh, well, this hand that I'm drawing, you know, I'm not going to really be able to do anything with it. I'm going to bust on purpose. And I was able to do that a couple times, but like that type of thinking just does not come naturally to me. I am not a press your luck kind of person. Whenever I play like a straight up press your luck game, I always either go completely, like I will go until I bust every single time, or I never do it. Like I have no judgment there at all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean it's true. You're horrible at press your luck games.
Right, I am.
You don't want to, you never want to take that risk.
Well, that's why like I don't really gamble, is because that is not a thing that I just can't. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, you are not. You are about as far from a daredevil as an archetype as I think any of the others. I think I can make a case in some respects for any of the others except for that one for you.
Right.
It's just not a thing that you do, and that's fine. For me, I sort of, I'm willing to chance it a little bit more. I'm willing to press that luck a little bit more. In a press your luck game, I'll go nuts. That's fine, because that's kind of that's the purpose of the game. But in a game like this, for me, I have to do it with intent. I have to do it for a reason, not just because I want like this huge payout, but maybe I am having to choose between like, I really want this one card because it works well with the card that I have in play, and I really want to buy it so I can slot it to that particular card, but I'm one off and I need, I'm going to try for one more. Or it could be a thing where like I have 2 mana for my turn and I don't want to buy another farm, so I'm gonna just try, and if nothing happens, I didn't lose anything, and then like you said, the idea about if your token is flipped, that's the only way that you can get it flipped up again, which then you could later use to get that +1 mana again. So it's kind of a win-win in that sense, because if you press your luck, then you get that 1 mana that you need right there. But if you don't get it, then you get to flip your token back over, and you can use it on a subsequent turn where you might be stuck again. So for me, I kind of do it, I do it where there's a purpose. And I also do this other thing, and I guess it's metagaming a little bit. I'm curious if anybody else does this, where you kind of card count, because there's always, unless you buy more cursed cards with curses on them, you know exactly how many cursed lands there are in the deck. I think it's 9. And
oh my god, I'm an idiot.
So I have a tendency of just sort of like looking in my discard pile and going, all right, well, there's 6 of them in my discard pile, and I still have a third of my deck. Statistically speaking, I have a pretty good chance of not busting. But if there's like 3 in my discard pile, I'm probably going to lose if I try it. So that's you never noticed that?
I never even thought of it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. Wow.
Well, maybe that's why you have such a hard time with that game.
Maybe. And I really like Mystic Vale, but like I lose so badly every time. And it doesn't put me off the game. I like it. Oh man.
Never thought to
Buddy,
just calculate how
it's a
many
whole new
curses.
world. No, I didn't.
See, I never told you because I didn't want to be like, this is how you should be playing on.
I mean, like, I probably, in the moment, I've done that a little bit. We're measuring, like, oh, okay, well, I still have a really full deck. I'm not going to push my luck or, like, whatever. But I've never actually thought about it. No. Okay. Let's move on. I'm the
All right.
worst gamer.
All right. Yeah. No, it's true. Okay, so let me then move to the other kind of tactical area that you kind of can do or not do in the game. And that is how you spend your focus. So what I mean by that is there's two primary, there's two essentially resource pools in the game. One is the mana, which is what you use to buy more cards so that you can sleeve your deck and make it better. The other one are the veils, which you buy by getting those various different symbols.
Mm-hmm.
And while some cards are going to have both of those, particularly the more expensive ones, often a card, especially the middle grade cards, are either going to give you mana or they're going to give you symbols in order to get veil cards. So my question is, are you more apt to focus on the mana and upgrading your deck, or are you more focused on getting the symbols to buy the veils? Because both of them can give you VP at the end of the game, which is ultimately what you're doing to try to win. So there is a, obviously you can mix and match both, but if you have a preference, or do you have a preference? Like, do you have a specific path that you tend to focus one over the other?
Well, obviously, like I just said, I don't tend to do super great at Mystic Vale, but I've played both ways. And the last couple times I've played, I focused more on getting the Veil cards because it seems like that's what the game is telling you to do. But I also have to say that I haven't been hugely successful in doing that. So I don't know if it's a matter. I think you need to balance doing one or the other. I mean, doing both. And I tend to skew more towards buying a lot of the Veil cards, but not enough of the like normal cards to make it super useful. So yeah, that's how I usually fall in it. But in other games, like I've consciously tried not to do that and I still lose. So I don't know.
All right, that's fair. And I'm curious how other people approach it. For me, I have to say I generally do the opposite. I
And
actually
maybe that's why I do poorly and you always win.
no, because I've played games where with people who have like gone heavily after Veil cards, and they're just like at the end of the game, their deck is maybe isn't anything super valuable, but then they'll drop like 20 something VP in Veil cards, and it's just like, oh, all right, well you win because you are you're buying like two of them a turn with all the symbols. Um, so I think that I tend to focus primarily on upgrading cards. For one, because of that's the part that really appeals to me, is the idea of taking my deck and making it better and improving it and upgrading it. And I love tech trees and stuff anyway. So
yeah.
that really just kind of fits into my wheelhouse. And so I am drawn to that aspect of the game. Obviously, as you get into the late stages of the game, I start kind of buying veils almost by accident because I look it down and I'm like, oh, I
This
have
is the
enough.
most useful to me, yeah.
Well, I can do both. I'm like, all right, well, I just happen to have these symbols out in play, so I'll take this veil card, and it kind of feeds on itself in that case. But my focus almost always is on the cards themselves, and the veils are usually an afterthought. Though the last game I played, I did go veil heavy, but that's for other reasons, just because I wanted to try something different mostly. So like, yeah, I don't know. It's again, you can do both, and most people do a mix of both. But I guess it's sort of like where you gravitate towards. It's like, do you like getting the veils for the abilities and the VP that they grant, they're kind of always there, or just the idea of the card upgrades and sleeving the cards and stuff like that. Because, that's for me what draws me into the game. So I was just curious if anybody had like a strong preference one way or the other. And it's okay if you don't. I mean,
I feel like with Mystic Vale, every tactical decision I make in the game is wrong. Every time. And for a game that I would play Mystic Vale pretty much anytime. You put it down, and like there are flaws to the game, and we'll talk about those. But like I generally, I really like it. But every decision, like if I decide to go heavy on the Veils, that's not a game where I should be doing that. If I decide to go like heavy on card building, that's not a game I should be doing that. If I decide to go like a little of both, then I really should have mainlined Veils. Like it's just, I literally can't win.
Have you ever won Mystic Vale?
Probably not.
I never.
Yeah, and for a game that I really like, I mean, not that I need to win games in order to like them. I usually actually prefer games that I don't win. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what it is. I really do tend to enjoy games more if I never win them, which sounds bad, but it's like games that provide enough of like tactical block or challenge or whatever to me that I have trouble getting through them. I like that more than games that I can just win like the first time with no huge learning curve.
So I'm just gonna play nothing but like really complicated games with you from now on.
I would probably be fine with it. I think this says a lot about my personality.
You just like a challenge, but not winning.
I mean, I would like to win, but I think the winning isn't really. I like games that provide enough of a challenge that I don't end up winning them that often.
All right. So
does that make sense?
It does. So you have a question. Eric wants to know how much do you think that it is the unpredictability? He says because there's only a small portion of level 2 and 3 cards that come out, which can skew things. So how much of that for you is the unpredictability part of it?
How much of what is the unpredictability?
Your difficulty with the game.
Oh, I think that could be a big part of it. It's that idea of like adapting my strategy to the couple of really good cards that do come out. And also being able to buy them and take advantage of them. Like that could be it. I honestly I feel like if I knew the answer, then I wouldn't have this problem.
That is a thing. It does happen.
But I think that's a good point.
I would say so, yes.
It's like unpredictable, but not in the same way that like, Arkham or something is unpredictable. It's like tactically unpredictable. I don't know. I'm just making things up now. I don't know. Why? Yeah.
Okay. It's fine. It's fine. You will just never win Mystic Vale, and the world will continue.
It will. I'll live.
But that actually keeps you playing the game, though.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that if I ever get to the point where I start winning it like pretty consistently, more often than not, I'll get bored and I'll never want to play it again.
So this actually brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about, because Mystic Vale was a game that came out and was like one of the games that was talked about at the time it came out. Mm-hmm. And it was really popular for a hot minute. And then like 6 months later, nobody was talking about Mystic Vale again. Mm-hmm. Now, as we know, that tends to become more and more frequent now with the ever churning of board game releases and the constant new hotness hype. That aspect isn't necessarily unique to Mystic Vale. However, there is a thing that seems to happen pretty regularly with people who play Mystic Vale. There's obviously a portion of people that really, really like it and will, like you, will always sit down and play it no matter what.
Yeah.
But there's also a not insignificant portion of gamers out there that started off really liking Mystic Vale, but they kind of got bored with it.
Like outgrew it?
Not that necessarily they outgrew it, but that they felt that there wasn't enough to keep them invested. So they felt that there wasn't enough replayability
I can
in this
totally
game.
see that.
So there's two things I want to kind of touch upon in that vein. Is one is I guess this is kind of like the criticism of the game. Is one of the two main areas that I often see critiqued and often hear, and if you know, I levy my own criticisms. Two of the areas that are often talked about. One of them is the replayability of the base game itself, because again, not so much that you only have a fixed deck of 20 cards, but there is only a fixed number of cards that you can get each playthrough. And especially the tier ones, because you only have so many tier 1 cards that are put out. There are multiple copies of each one. So you tend to see those fairly often, even after only a handful of playthroughs. And the 2s and 3s, while they're not, they don't cycle through as quickly, you also have multiple copies of those, and you tend to see those a lot. So do you feel that the game suffers on the replayability side? And if so, why?
I can see how people feel that way, because you can fully explore this game in like a couple of playthroughs, and then you've seen everything, maybe another 1 or 2 playthroughs to like completely get your strategy down. And then once you get to that point, and that could even happen like way faster for some players, once you get to that point, why keep going? Like, you've kind of extracted everything that you can from that game. And I think that that's what's happening with this. It's not that like the game itself is bad. It's just that, yeah, the card set is limited, and you can put them in different places in your deck and so on and so forth. You can customize, obviously, that's the whole thing. But when it really comes down to it, there is only so much you can do before you've like seen everything and developed your strategies. And then like, why keep going? For me, I will never get to that point where I have developed my strategy. So I'm like stuck in that first section. So it hasn't gotten to that point for me. But I can also easily see how if I, you know, played a couple more times and maybe paid attention to my cards more, that I could get there, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, I see what this game does, and cool, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't even necessarily think of that as a huge negative to the game, because like, I think it's a little unreasonable to demand infinite replayability from every single game that we get. Like, some games you're going to explore them, and then that's it. That's the point of the game, is to explore it and develop a strategy and figure out how things work. And then when you've done that, like, the game is done, and that's okay. So I think that maybe this is one of those.
Okay. I think that's fair. You know, for me, I think there's two areas, and like I said, I kind of said that earlier on, that like I felt there's two areas that there is a bit of a weakness with the game. One is the variety to the cards that are available to you is limited. If you discount all of the multiple copies, there's really only so many cards to go around each playthrough, and because of that, it can feel samey after a while. And So I think that can happen. I think it's one of these
Yeah.
games where people will play it for, 3, 4, 6, 10, 15 times or whatever, and they'll really get their enjoyment out of the game. But that for a lot of gamers, this is the type of game that sort of hits a ceiling.
Hmm.
Um, that that once you get to that point, there's nothing new to explore. There's nothing new to get out of the game. The experience is going to be the same every single time, because there's only so much variability to the cards that are available to you in the base game, right? So now for some people that's it. That's all they need to do, and they're going to walk away, and that's the end of it.
Hmm.
So we actually, the last time we actually played with the first expansion, which is thrown in. So my first question is, did you even notice?
I did actually, because the cards that were, well, okay, two reasons. One, the cards from the expansion that we played in just like thematically like looked a little bit different. I don't know that I could pick out every single one, but there were a few. Like there was this like, I forget what it was. It was like chromatic something, and it was this like huge multicolored thing that just,
I think it was the dragon, the chromatic
yeah,
dragon.
yeah. And it wasn't like jarring in that, but it also didn't look like a lot of the stuff from the base game. It didn't look super out of place. It just looked like, oh, okay, we're doing something a little different, like a little bit of a variation. And so I noticed that. Um, and also because that film that is like so satisfying when it comes off was still on someone.
Oh yeah, yeah, the protective film and the like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, Eric was
But
saying that he feels it's kind of one of these games you get to explore mechanically, and
yeah,
that you can get some fun out of it from the mechanical perspective, even if it's not necessarily going to have an incredibly long shelf life.
right.
He referenced, 5 Tribes for him is a similar thing, where like you can only play that so many times before you sort of have gotten your fill of it.
Right.
So.
But if you
Um,
think about it, like any form of media, it's going to be like that. I mean, yeah, there are movies that you're going to watch over and over and over again, but there are a lot of movies where you're going to watch them like once or twice or whatever, and then you're good. You get it.
Right. So with the
Except for Clue.
yeah, Clue is ageless, timeless. That's the word I was going for. So a couple folks were curious, and I was curious if you had noticed, aside from the artwork.
Probably not.
So with the first expansion, there's not a lot of there's nothing new mechanically. The second expansion does actually start adding in some new stuff. I believe the biggest thing in the second expansion is you get leader cards. So
Mm-hmm.
you basically get a character essentially that will give you a unique ability. So not unique to gaming itself, but that's new to this game. So that's kind of I would say probably the newest mechanical thing, and that's in the second expansion, which we haven't played with yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the stairs. But in terms of the first expansion, there's not new mechanics, but what it does is it fleshes out the existing mechanics that come in the base game. So I actually really enjoyed throwing in the first expansion. There's not a ton to it, but the new cards particularly add in things that that kind of add more things that maybe there's, like, for example, there's a lot more when you play this card abilities, which is kind of neat because that means when you're actually flipping them over into your play area, something happens besides
Mm-hmm.
just dropping them all on the table. There's more of, there's been a couple of those in the base game, but there's a lot more of them in the expansion. There's also more harvest card abilities, and there's also I think there's a new one that happens when you discard it, so at the end
Mm-hmm.
of your turn. But it's definitely like it's just more of that. It's more of the same, but at the same time helps give it, I guess, that additional shot in the arm that I think it kind of needs to make it a little bit more robust in terms of what you can do. Because particularly the when you play these card type things, I really dug those because, there was that one, I forget which one it was. I think it's the Canopy Explorer or something like that, where when you play it, so that means when you draw, when you're putting stuff into play from when you're resetting, when you play the card, you get to search through your deck and put a cursed land into your discard pile. Like that, I built it, basically that last game we played, I focused entirely on trying to get, that card and trying to use that card as often as possible. So that made me, for instance, try not to upgrade any of my cursed land cards, because if I managed to get, I think I actually got 2 of them in that game. It was only 2 that actually got put out, and I got both of them. But that idea was like, if I got them to come out, then I just get to discard one of the negative cards. So it just adds a little bit more depth to it without changing the game at all. Like,
there's a very happy pig behind you.
Which one?
Adler.
Okay. I can't actually turn around and see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do think that for people who have, they feel like there's a lot of limitation with the base game, I would throw in the first expansion and see if that changes your opinion at all, because I do feel like it just gives it that little extra soupçon of flavor to it, of mechanical flavor to it, of just like, giving it a little extra bite each game, just a little bit. I'm not sure at this point, actually, in all honesty, if I would go back to just playing the base game. I think I would just leave the first expansion in.
Well, I don't think there's any reason to.
There really isn't. It's kind of like the first expansion to Race for the Galaxy. It's like, it doesn't really do things. It just adds more cards. It doesn't fundamentally change the game, and it just makes it better. So I'm just going to leave them in there and run with it, and most people won't even notice.
Right.
So I would, and the nice thing is the expansions for Mystic Vale are pretty cheap.
Are they?
So, yeah, I don't know exactly what the price is, but considering the base game itself was not incredibly expensive, yeah, I mean, I think I got them for like less than $20 each.
Oh, cool.
It might be 20 in your friendly game store, but I bought it online because we don't really have a friendly game store around here. And yeah, it's Nicole actually in the chat actually said that she heard that the first expansion was basically supposed to be in the base game, and that's entirely possible. It could have just been that they had watered the game down so they could get it out. I haven't actually heard that, but I also wouldn't be surprised. And I am going to come back to the aspect of what the game is doing and its future, because I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But the other thing, besides, I guess, the limitations of the base game that I feel that people tend to criticize, the other really valid one that I often hear, and I use this one myself, and I want to get your take, is the theme. Because this is a very mechanical game, and it's got some nice artwork, and it's got, the veils are really pretty, and some of the card artwork, even though it can be a little hard because of the translucent cards. But I feel like, there's a nice presentation visually for all that, even if it's not the most photogenic game. But from a thematic standpoint, bleh.
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't much of a theme. You could reskin this with pretty much anything and it would still work. I don't pay attention to the theme when I'm playing. I pay attention purely to whatever the mechanics of the card is doing. And for me, who loves story in games, whenever I do that, I know that the theme isn't really that important.
Yeah.
Which is fine, actually, because I think, like Eric said earlier, this is a game that is about exploring a mechanic. It's not really a game that's going to tell you a deep story. That's not what it's for. It's to show you, hey, look at what we made. Look at these cool things that we did. Right,
exactly. And that's and I do think that's a great way of describing it, that you are exploring a mechanic. Much in the same way, if you think about it, much in the same way that when Dominion itself is not, I mean, it has a theme, and you can make arguments to it, but it's not, it's not a terribly deep thing. It's just, I wouldn't even say it's
It has
tacked
like
on.
a
It's just,
theme that ties it all together so that everything makes sense.
it's a
But
justified theme. That's about
right,
all I can say. And like, because they're each of the Dominion expansions is supposed to convey a different era of your empire, and so each of them are doing something a little bit different. Because
whatever.
prosperity is things are going fantastic, and you have an empire, and Dark Ages is everything has gone to hell.
But
That sort
nobody
of thing.
thinks about it that way.
No, nobody does, and I think the
They're
same thing
like, you want to
happens.
play with prosperity if you really like getting more money, and you want to play with like seaside or whatever it is if you really like setting aside cards, and you want to do like, you always think about Dominion expansions in terms of what is the unique mechanic that is associated with this expansion. You never really think about it in like, well, I want to explore a time where my kingdom was full of variety, so let's play cornucopia. Like, no one does
that. No, and they really don't. Like, it's not, that's just not the way that you approach a game like that, because that's not the inherent focus. And the same thing for me happens with the theme of this one, because essentially, like, okay, I explained at the onset of this that you had, it's supposed to be these druids that are trying to save the land, and to stave off the blight, and that's fine. Like, if that's what it was, like the general premise, and they were going to run with it, and that was all they were going to do, I would be fine with it. I would just say, okay, it's this kind of this loose theme that's kind of on top of this abstracted mechanical construct.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I would do it. But what bugged me personally was the idea that got implanted in my head when I first read the rules the very first time, and I read through the rules, and the back of the book gives you this like neat little like flavor breakdown on the 4 different druid clans and how they correspond to the 4 different decks.
Why?
In the, what's that?
I said why.
Well, I thought that was really neat. I thought
it is really cool, but it just feels like unnecessary.
Right. And yeah, it turns out ultimately that was all just fluff. There is no unique role until you get to the second expansion, and that's not tied to a particular clan. Essentially, the clans are just the color backs of the decks, and all the decks are identical. So I felt that was kind of a letdown and maybe a missed opportunity there of like, either don't bother with the flavor aspect of that, right, or give me something that connotates that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that just bugs me. Does that anybody else? Like, what's your thought on that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's like kind of a waste of time. I mean, it's their decision. If that's how they want to roll, that's fine. But personally, if I were sitting there and trying to manage this project, assigning like, oh, well, we need someone to write these fanfic backstories about each deck, and it's like, but all the decks are the same and no one cares. So that to me, it just seems like a waste of time, but like, whatever you want.
Right. So, not a tangent, but there was a question that I wanted to answer. So the question was asked that they basically did a similar game with superheroes. That the game that you're trying to think of is called Custom Heroes. It's also by AEG. It uses the same mechanic, the same card crafting system. Basically, AEG is going to be running with this, and actually, that's coming up here on my talking points in a few minutes here. But it's a different game, so it's not Mystic Vale, but it uses the same engine essentially, but it's for a different game. As is where Mystic Vale essentially came from, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I don't know. You're
so mysterious.
Well, I actually wrote things down this time. I didn't just
Good job.
Sometimes I just wing things. Yeah, so I don't know. I felt that that was kind of a wasted opportunity, and maybe that in tandem with the fact that there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't as many cards as there probably should have been. Uh, that why people kind of got their fill of the game fairly quickly. It's it's kind of like take the base game of Ascension or something like that. Even that, you still have a lot of different things to try out and go through, or Dominion, where you have like even the base game comes with like 30 different card decks, and you're only playing with 10 at a time. So there's a lot of it to explore there. Where I feel like Mystic Vale, there wasn't as much as it could have been between the combination of those two things. So I'll leave that at there. So, is Mystic Vale a novelty? Is there a game here that's really worth talking about ultimately, or is this just a game to fuel a mechanic?
I mean, I don't think those are mutually exclusive categories. And yes, it is a game that is just here to kind of, introduce this mechanic and get people playing it and kind of see, I think, what people liked and what people didn't like. And, but at the same time, that doesn't make it bad.
Well, some people,
some people think it does.
Some people, not necessarily Mystic Vale, but some people, they don't like games where the game is just a mechanic that that the game is playing out one mechanic.
Right. And, I felt that way with other games before. There was, I forget what it was, that Mars game where I felt like the whole game was just a market mechanic. Like
Mars Needs Mechanics.
Yeah, that one. The whole game was just basically operating a market and not even a really complex one. And a lot of people really liked it, and that's cool. For me, I was just like, I would just rather go play a bigger game with a market in it. For Mystic Vale, I think what's a little different for me personally is that this isn't a mechanic that I've seen in other games. I mean, aside from like Gloom. And so it's new enough that I would probably like it more if it was part of a bigger game, I think, but we don't have that right now.
We don't, but coincidentally, we will be getting one. Which is kind of where I was going with all this.
Here, or like we as in general gaming?
Like the collective gamer we.
So it's like, oh my god, no more boxes right now.
I know it's been a busy month for the mailman. So this kind of goes to the question that was asked with regards to custom heroes and where I'm kind of going with that. Like, so for those who might not be aware of it, Mystic Vale was essentially designed to be a primer game.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Vaguely. Is this a quiz? Okay, it is a quiz.
Yes, I'm quizzing you.
I think you mean that this was a game that was designed to, like I said before, introduce this mechanic, but it's not exactly like the final way that they want to get this mechanic out into the game playing public.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, you're pretty much.
Do I get a sticker?
You don't get a sticker, but you do get a pat on the head.
Psych! I have my own stickers. Sticker club.
Yeah. So Mystic Vale is a primer game because AEG has plans for this card crafting system. It's their system. It was designed by John Clare, and they have intent to run pretty heavily with this idea. And they don't like, okay, so this was a really neat thing because you don't see this very often in gaming. But if you bought Mystic Vale and you actually turned to the back of the rulebook, there's an advertisement for another game that does not yet exist.
What is it?
So it's called Edge of Darkness. And
Ooh.
so at the time of this recording, which is in May of 2017, it doesn't even have a listing on BGG yet. But they let people know at the time it was printed, that Mystic Vale was printed, that they have intent for a bigger scale game as part of it. Because what essentially is going on is that it's going to, much like deck builders in kind of the deck builder 2.0 era, have become a mechanic as part of a larger game. So
Mm-hmm.
too is this card crafting system going to be a mechanic as part of a larger game. So Edge of Darkness is kind of this kind of like much larger, more complicated game that they have that's in development, where that fuels things that you're able to do. So obviously details are kind of sparse at the moment. We should know more during the summer or by the end of the summer. That it sounds like it's going to be like a combat based, maybe area control or some sort of fighting game where the card crafting system is going to be how you essentially upgrade your armies and the like. And so they have definite plans for this, and you can see a little bit of that in Custom Heroes, where you are playing as heroes and you're basically leveling up your heroes. So that's kind of a neat thing to do with that. That's using the card crafting system. And then I don't know all the details on how this is worked out behind the scenes. I don't know if there's like a licensing thing or if it's just sort of that was the arrangement that was made at the time. But the upcoming game Downfall by TMG is also using this card crafting system. So
interesting.
while the other three are all, Mystic Vale, Custom Hero, and Edge of Darkness are all AEG, Downfall is also designed by John Clare, also using this kind of system. At least, actually, I take that back. Downfall might not be. I could have that wrong. But the other three are definitely using the card crafting system. I actually need to check before I actually just start spouting things that aren't true. So I know the Downfall is designed by John Clare and that it's probably coming out later this year. It's a little bit later than they originally planned. It's taken longer to do that. So that might be. They might. It's okay. So I just checked. Downfall is going to have cards that do things in a unique way, but whether or not it's a card crafting system, I can't actually say for certain. So don't quote me on that. I'm probably wrong on Downfall, but it was designed by John Clare. But anyway, so Custom Heroes definitely uses card crafting, and Edge of Darkness definitely will use card crafting. And that's what essentially they wanted people to get used to the card crafting system before they came out with a much larger game with Edge of Darkness. And so they basically designed another game solely as a vehicle for the mechanic, which is Mystic Vale. So if you feel like Mystic Vale is basically exploring a mechanic, you are not wrong. That was the original intent of the game, was actually to make people familiarized with this unique card crafting system, because not a lot of games use that translucent card aspect. Prior to Mystic Vale, the only one that we had known about was Gloom, and that doesn't even do it in the same way. You're sort of kind of laying one card over another, but there's some of that, but it's not exactly the same sort of thing. And our May Indie Spotlight game, Zephyr, uses overlay, but again in a very different way. And that's only one small part of the game. So nobody really does this card crafting system the way that Mystic Vale does. And the whole thing was predicated because John wanted to make a game where the idea of a card sleeve actually played into the mechanics of the game. And while this wasn't his original plan. This was the end result. So I forget exactly what it was. Like he wanted to have sleeves be something, but then it involved having to make custom
Right,
sleeve for
right.
different cards. Anyway, that's a whole design story thing. You can read that on out on the internet. But but yeah, that was where the whole like inspiration came from, was like, how can I make card sleeves relevant to a game?
Which I think is really cool.
Yeah, so I mean, it's got this kind of neat story to it. Yeah. So yeah, it's Eric in the chat just realized that the ad in the back of the book.
Oh,
Yeah, so yeah, it's got combat, deck building. I guess there's worker placement in there. I haven't actually looked in the back in a while, but yeah, it's a very ambitious game that they're working on.
mhm.
So I did, I wish I had more information on that. It's not a case of we have insider information that we can't share. In this particular case, we don't know any more than you do. Aside from, there probably will be more information about it, either come Origins or most likely Gen Con, where AEG will start talking about kind of the next steps for the card crafting system, particularly Edge of Darkness. So what little I know is I think the game is just taking longer to actually get finalized than they originally planned, unsurprisingly. Especially if it's a game that's on the level of advertisement that they've started out with. Because I mean, when's the
I
last
know
time
it's a lot to live up to.
well, especially like, when's the last time that you can think of where a game came out advertising another game that wouldn't come out for another year? It's kind of like a teaser trailer for a movie that's not due out for another year.
Right.
You don't see that. Like, that's just, that in and of itself is kind of unique in the gaming world, because so many publishers, they don't want to commit to a timetable, and they don't actually commit, here either. But like, they don't want to show their hand of like what they're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a case of, not only do they tell you what they're working on, but they then printed it and said, here, this is what's coming out as a result of this down the road. It's the like complete opposite of like the Cool Mini or Not approach, or the Fantasy Flight approach, where they're going to hold everything until the last minute and have like this big kind of like press release and everybody goes nuts about it. That's generally what companies do, and the smaller ones do it when they're ready. But just in this particular case, I always found that was really unique, because you generally don't see them advertising it ahead of time. So anyway, where would you like to see this mechanic go, either in Mystic Vale or in something else?
I would love to see this move into a more thematic game, something I'm thinking like that involves a lot of character development, even a legacy style component to it. I mean, I love legacy. I know it's a gimmick, okay? I know it's a gimmick, but I love legacy games, so that's fine. But I'm thinking some big epic storytelling game like Arkham, which is always what I'm thinking about. I would love to see this mechanic brought into that a little bit, so that as you're playing through the game and your character is meeting these challenges, you're actually able to change like your character's card or something like that. I think that would be really cool to see how this type of mechanic would play out in something that's much, much, much more thematic.
Okay.
What about you?
I would love to see, again, much like the way that deck builders are going. I really want to see, game like Edge of Darkness, where it becomes not the focal point anymore, that it becomes just part of something larger. So I actually think that the idea of almost, of having that, I think that there will be kind of that character upgrade type thing, whether it's in this game or in, I haven't played Custom Heroes, so I don't know if it sounds like that's what that does, at least on a superficial level. But having it be like part of a campaign type thing, more like on the line of like Shadowrun, and being able to upgrade your character that way. But also the idea of like, oh, something happens to your character and they get horribly wounded, so like you take out a thing from your character, like you lose it, like forget it, you're done. That actually sounds kind of really cool, to be honest. So maybe you should talk to John and figure something out and get your name on it.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I'd also like to see it done in a way that that really allows it to flourish. I guess in a because like in Mystic Vale, you can do certain things like when you play the card, when you discard the card, when you get like the thing with the guardians and all these different symbols and stuff like that. I just see the potential for like building cards that like have built-in card combos. There's a little bit of that in Mystic Vale of like, oh, like I said, with the guardian stuff, or like if I have these two things on the same card, this makes it like a really powerful card. But like the idea of saying, hey, if you get almost like wizards and spell casting and stuff, like, hey, if you manage to get this this portion of a spell, this ingredient and this ingredient, or this rune and this rune on the same card, then it creates this other effect. Like if you get A and B on the same card, then thing C happens. Like being able
that would be really cool. Yeah,
to be able to build that, I think that would be really fun. And because that would open up all sorts of deck building potential and combo potential and that sort of thing, again, without going into the full on engine build that can happen with deck builders where they can get bloated and stuff like that. And so yeah, I mean, I would be curious on what other people would have for ideas on like, where does this card crafting thing go? Amber from the chat says like a fashion design game where like you could like you could upgrade or create outfits and stuff like that.
Oh my god, or like a baking game where you can design your own like pastries and cakes and then use this to decorate them and get different points. Yes.
This is just because you watch British Bake Off.
Great British Bake Off? Yes. It's great. Don't leave out the great. It's great.
No, I understand. I understand. I was just not sure how she agrees with you, by the way.
Yeah, of course, because it's awesome.
So is that the inherent kind of takeaway? And I think this is gonna be like the last major section here is what is that the biggest takeaway from the game is the potential for the mechanic, or do you see that there is a long lifeline of possibilities with Mystic Vale itself? I guess, which do you think has a bigger long-term potential, the mechanic or the game itself?
For me, it's definitely the mechanic. I mean, the game is fun, but I enjoy the game because I like playing with that mechanic. I mean, that mechanic is basically the whole game. So for me, it's definitely that.
No, just definite for sure.
Yes.
Okay. And that's that. And I think it'd be good to find out because I believe I want to say that there's already 3 expansions for it.
Which seems, I mean, I guess I can kind of understand that because you want to keep people talking about it and keep people thinking about this before you can get like that big game out that they're hoping will really showcase it in a different way. So I can see putting out, different expansions to keep this on people's radar, but I still don't think that it's about the game itself. Right.
Yeah, I know there's 2 for sure, and I believe there's a 3rd in the pipeline. Because the second one just came out, but I'm almost positive that there is a 3rd one in the pipeline. After that, I have no idea. So the question is are these expansions enough to keep the game fresh and viable, or is it just a matter of time before the next game comes along that it's the next again, I've been using the whole analogy between this and kind of what Dominion did for deck builders. Dominion's great; it's still a lot of fun, but there's other deck builders that have sort of like evolved past it in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the mechanic here is bound to do the same. I have to agree with you. I think the lasting effect will be the mechanic more than the game itself. And I don't know how many expansions you can really throw at it to kind of extend its like lifespan. Because like how much can you really do to manipulate it without just like fundamentally changing the game? So, yeah. I guess it's kind of more in some respects. I think it's a little bit more of the same, but I think it's opening up a door that is going to be really interesting to explore going forward. But in the meantime, I really have no intention of like having Mystic Vale go anywhere. I really enjoy it. And I think for me, it would have to get to a point where there are, 5 or 6 games that are using the system. And then I can start picking and going, okay, do I really need this?
Right. Or if, like what you said with other people, where they get to the point where they feel they've fully explored the game and they're done. Like if we get to that point, I'm fine with getting rid of it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get to that point. Who knows, how many games will get made with this system.
Who knows how many times I'll have to play before I actually win.
Well, next time, remember that there are 9 curses.
Yeah. Remind me next time.
I can't believe that you've played the entire time.
Never even thought of it.
Yeah. Well, now you know.
Yep.
So anything else that you wanted to bring up about Mystic Vale? I think
I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything. I do want to emphasize, I know we mentioned it earlier, but I do really like the art.
Yeah, I do think that the art is.
I mean, I don't want to talk about it at length because there really isn't a lot to talk about at length, but I think it's well done, and I just want to make sure we pointed that out.
Yeah, I mean, like these are just a couple of the Vale cards for folks, and like that's just nice art.
Yeah.
And I do think that the art does a decent job, and like I said before, it's not very photogenic, but the art.
It's hard just because the transparent cards.
Right, and so like it's hard to really get a good snapshot of those, but I think those those do a decent job as well art wise. So it's not a bad looking game at all, and I think it has all the components for a decent game. But I think I can also understand why some people after X number of playthroughs they feel like they've kind of gotten their fill. I haven't yet, and I've played it quite a few times at this point. But this is also a game that really just speaks to me in that sense of like I can see the potential for what's there. I think there's a lot more under the surface than what the game in its core version is capable of offering, which is why I think exploring some of the expansion stuff will be interesting. Particularly the second expansion, and then seeing what other games come out that also do the same thing. So I think the criticisms are justified, honestly, for Mystic Vale, but I also think what it's providing is going to outweigh and outlast that. That's kind of my take.
Yeah.
So plus it's also really fun to pull these off.
The film, like pulling off that little layer of film is so satisfying.
I don't even know why. It just is.
Yep.
I have there's no deep thing about that. It's just like
we should go though.
It's like popping the bubble wrap. It's like there's no
it's
intrinsic. Fun. It's just fun. So I think on that note, then, unless anybody had anything else. That's probably a good place to stop for this month's board game club.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah. So we'll be doing our next one in probably 6 weeks, which will put us if the calendar says correctly, which we'll probably be putting it right at the beginning of July. So it might be the week of July 4th. So it'll be right around then, give or take. And what we'll do is as usual, in the next day or so, we will go onto Twitter and we will put up a poll for what the next one will be, so you can vote on what the next game for Board Game Club is going to be talking about. And so definitely put your vote in there, and then we will pick that and make the announcement as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. All right. Sound good?
Okay. Yes.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.